Do you have any doubt in your mind that Columbus, when he first went to Spain, he was so arrogant he didn't understand the covenant? But the second time when he went, after living with the monks for a while, he was humble enough to understand the covenant and got it when he first came over.
He got it. And all you have to do is look in his book of prophecies, his diary. He named it this.
Mm-hmm.
He understood. He understood things so profound. He understood the connection to Israel. He believed that his discovery of this new world, what he thought was the Indies, he believed that this was going to create something, start a chain of events that would actually
reestablish Israel.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And that's exactly the same thing that the Pilgrims felt.
Exactly. The Pilgrims get here. They call themselves the New Israel. John Winthrop gives the speech of American literature, the City on the Hill speech. That's an invocation of the covenant. And he says, in his writings, it's a capital C, he puts the covenant. The covenant. We're making a covenant. We're taking out a commission, he says. And he repeats the same pattern. I mean, it's like reading the Old Testament all over again, reading American history.
As wonderful as this is to know that Columbus, the Pilgrims, and the Founding Fathers actually entered into an American covenant to serve the God of Israel in righteousness in order to be the beneficiaries of his blessings, as was Israel, it is an even more amazing experience to sit here watching these two Mormons explain these things, knowing that they know that the truth goes way beyond what they are willing to reveal, and that they are holding it back for fear. Not only that, but it makes it worse even to know that they have conspired to hide the whole truth. It's amusing in a sardonic sort of way, maybe, to note that evidently Pat Gray, one of Beck's sidekicks on the radio program, who's also a Mormon, inadvertently let the cat out of the bag when he let the name of the real book slip out and was quickly corrected by Ballard. Let's just play that for a minute. I mean, it's very short, so you can see what I'm talking about.
Back in just a second with Timothy Ballard. The name of the book is The Covenant, One Nation Under God.
The American Covenant.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Well, it's actually now it's the covenant.
Just the covenant, yeah.
The
Okay.
Covenant, One Nation Under God. I think you were reading an early version of it.
I think so.
The Covenant, One Nation Under God.
The American Covenant.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Well, it's actually now it's the covenant.
The American Covenant.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Well, it's actually now it's the covenant.
The American Covenant.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Well, it's actually now it's the covenant.
I tried to kind of duplicate that a little bit so you wouldn't miss it. But that's amazing. It was so confusing to me for a while because I didn't know at first what they were doing. I didn't know that they had actually published a second book with the LDS content removed. I couldn't understand why they had changed the name of what I thought was the first and only book. And when I finally realized the truth of the matter, that they had republished the book under a different title, and not only that, that they were being careful to hide the fact. Let's see. I wonder if I could pull that up. I had some graphics here on it, but I don't know if it's, yeah, maybe I can. So this was the book that I thought there was only one of them, but it turns out, of course, that was the original work, and they scrubbed it, changed the cover, and took all the LDS content out of it. And so I was just I was dumbfounded. They had republished the book under a different title, and not only that, they were careful to hide the fact that it was evidently unbeknownst even to Pat Gray. And so this was very devastating to me. There was no other word for it. But maybe, you can see they just don't think that they could do this right now. It would be too costly. There's something they're afraid of. Maybe Glenn Beck would lose most of his audience who are waiting for him to convert and leave the cult of Mormonism. I don't know what it is. But the fact is, this golden opportunity of gathering together the evangelicals around the table like they can for any other thing. They can gather around to discuss the Muslims. They can gather around to discuss the Jews. They can gather around to discuss the evangelicals and everything else, but they can't gather around to discuss the Mormons. Why is that? You know, they could gather around the table and discuss the Mormon testimony, that's all it is, on a nationwide program. How great would that be? How it fits into the most frequently asked question of Bible students of the end times would make for great material. You know, the fact that they ask, what about America, continually, you know? But no, that was lost, and the opportunity to discuss the critical knowledge so needed by Gentile America was deviously hidden by those who know better. At the very least, they could have acknowledged the existence of the first book with some kind of, well, they kind of did right at the end. I mean, but most people would have missed it. It went by so fast. Oh yeah, you must have read the earlier book, Pat. That's about all they said. But they didn't talk about it having, you know, to give people a choice. Why can't they give them a choice, for crying out loud? At the very least, they could have acknowledged the existence of his first book with some kind of a disclaimer that the second book leaves out the LDS specific material for those who are too hard over on the Mormon cult thing to accept it. But no, they completely ignored the most important knowledge of our generation, that the God of Israel has set his hand again the second time to gather his people out of spiritual Egypt, so that they may serve him in the promised land of America, and with them all the Gentiles who will not harden their hearts, but will hearken unto his voice. How important is that, to make that known? Later that day, they compounded their error on the Blaze TV show, where at the time the slogan was, ironically enough, the truth lives here. Let's watch that now.
4,000 years ago, God spoke to a man called Abraham.
Through thee, all nations will be blessed.
Setting in motion an irrevocable link between heaven and earth, a link that bestows powers and blessings, but also terrible consequences. The men that knew this power used it to build the greatest nation on earth. Others threatened to use it to destroy us. An ancient battle that continues today. The Covenant, America's sacred and immutable connection to ancient Israel, by Timothy Bauer.
This is such a shocking book because of its truth that you don't even know. It is shocking because so much of this history has been completely dismissed and buried. Why? 1776, George Washington says, beg for forgiveness, fast and pray, beg the Lord to be on our side, or that we can be on his side. And he did it again in July. We'll explain what happened because of that day. I'm joined with Tim Ballard. He's a historian, author of The Covenant, available now at legendslibrary.org and also on Amazon.com. Welcome. How are you, sir?
I'm great. It's great to be here.
De Tocqueville said that we are, or he's credited as saying, he found America's goodness in her churches. We are great because we are good. This is much further than just be good.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Take me from Columbus and tell me the story of what the covenant is.
The covenant is, I will be your God, you will be my people. We read about this in the Old Testament. Well, what if the Old Testament story is replayed on American soil? And my contention is that it was. And we can go back to Columbus himself. What a fascinating person in our history that is completely underrated and cast aside. Columbus understood a lot of things about what he was doing. And he said, if you read in his journal, the book of the prophecies, he called it, he said, I am discovering a new world. He thought it was the Indies, but it was a new world. And it's going to begin a chain of events that will restore Israel.
This is so amazing, as we talked about on my radio program today, because maybe 2 years ago, I went to a few scholars, including Dr. Peter Lilback, and I said, I'm telling you, we made a covenant, and our founders knew it, and it was all leading up to the founding of Israel. And the question will be whether we are now, if we've outlived our usefulness because we're no longer living the covenant. And Peter said to me, Glenn, you know, he's a formal scholar on George Washington and his religious writings, and he said, I don't think you can make that case. And I said, Peter, would you just look? He was on the show a couple of months ago, and he wrote a little book about that big just on what George Washington said about Israel. He called me up and he said, Glenn, believe it or not, I think you're right. I think you're right. And it only makes common sense. We talked about this earlier today. America's Prophet, this is Bruce Feiler.
Excellent book.
Great book. It's about how America, all the way from the Pilgrims and Columbus, they knew they were coming over. I haven't read this.
You got to read it.
I got to read it.
Yes.
Okay. And then McCullough.
Awesome.
McCullough also talks about something that you talk about in your book, which is, he talks about the fog, but you talk specifically about the covenant of that fog.
Right.
Explain what George Washington did.
On May 17th, 1776.
Today,
which, awesome that I get to be here explaining it today. George Washington called his men to fast and pray. And he told them that we will only be victorious if God blesses our arms. And he actually issued that in conjunction with the Continental Congress. And he did it again in July. In fact, he did it before all the major miracles and battles that we can read about. And so he knew the British were coming. And he knew when they came, I mean, he's leading a band of citizen soldiers, farmers, and what's he thinking? How on earth is he going to take on the superpower of the world? Because he knows something, the secret. There's a covenant, and he can tap into it, and he's trying desperately to do it. He issues these calls.
Ballard goes on to explain all about the American truth, and let me see if I can get, okay, now we get the video back. All about the American truth, all except its connection with Joseph and the voices of the dust, from the dust, testifying of the modern restoration of Israel and its testimony of Jesus Christ and the promise of the holy city to come, the New Jerusalem, when all will be invited to go there to gird up their loins, preparing for the second coming of Christ. It wasn't the founding fathers that made this nation so great, but the God of Israel, who has now shown the Gentiles his power to bless nations, and has revealed unto them his intent to exercise that matchless power to restore his ancient covenant people to the lands of their inheritances, and to bless them way beyond anything the world has ever dreamed of. But Beck and Ballard were afraid to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So they dissembled, preferring not to risk offending those who fight against Mount Zion. In the next and last clip, they conclude with only a brief and anemic reference to Genesis 49 and America's role in God's great and marvelous work. And then at the end of it, Glenn Beck looks directly into the camera and he testifies that he knows that the message of the one book with the picture of George Washington on the cover at ground zero is true, but his audience gets no inkling of what he knows about the message of the other book, which he has held back with the picture of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln and Joseph Smith and Captain Moroni on it. This is the one, the American Covenant, and they changed that, of course, to show the picture of George Washington only. Here you see Joseph Smith and Captain Moroni and George Washington and Lincoln are all together because that's what he was explaining. But no, you know, they got to fall back. All right, well, let's watch this short clip now.
Let me go now quickly to the scene on the front cover of your book. Here it is. This is Washington taking the oath.
Yes.
Tell me what he's got his hand. He's got his hand on the Bible.
Yes.
He ad-libs. So help me God.
Yes.
What's the scripture?
The scripture. Now, the scripture, to get the full context, you really have to read because it's deep and it's profound. It's from Genesis 49. People say that the Bible doesn't talk about America. The Bible doesn't have anything to do with America. I take issue with that. I believe it does, and I believe Washington knew it did. Washington had his hand in a scripture that most people wouldn't even recognize. It is profound. It's the key to unlocking the prophecies about America. I believe the ancients did see America, and I believe I have proof of it.
And that's in the book.
It's in the book.
Okay. This is an important book. It is an important story that you're not going to get anyplace else. You're not going to get the story of the covenant. Nobody even speaks in these terms anymore, but I am telling you, I know it to be true. I know it to be true that we would not have been able to beat the British. We wouldn't have been able to conquer slavery and save the Union. We wouldn't have been able to win the Second World War. Israel wouldn't have been established. We wouldn't have been the people to do any of this stuff had we not made a covenant with God. The name of the book is The Covenant. Go to Amazon.com right now and grab your copy of it and read it. The Covenant by Timothy Ballard. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Sad, just so sad. Just yesterday, Joel Richardson made it so very clear how he's ready. I mean, he doesn't know it, but he's ready to hear the fullness of the gospel. Can you imagine how powerful an effect Glenn Beck could have had in this opportunity to share the fullness of the gospel? And Joel would have known about it. He could have even invited him on his program to have it. This is not a video clip. This is an audio clip, but I want to play it. It's not very long, but to give you the idea of what Joel Richardson understands about Christianity, which the Mormons have been teaching for so long, but he doesn't know the part about Joseph here in America. He needs to understand that.
So it sounds like that we need to find the commonality between the Jews and the Christians in order to bring them back to God. Because if we start talking about the New Testament and things of that nature, which they're not accustomed to talking about and they don't believe in, correct? Then we're not winning them over at that point. Is that what I hear you saying?
Well, it's not a matter of avoiding the New Testament. It's a matter of handling the New Testament rightly. I'm convinced, and really you can demonstrate the fact that Christianity has been corrupted by an unbiblical worldview, by a Greek philosophical worldview, and which has produced replacement theology. It's produced this idea that the hope of the Christian is to someday die and go to heaven forever. Now, yes, if we were to die today, we would be with him in the spirit, but we're still awaiting and longing for the resurrection of the reestablishment of the Jewish kingdom. And so it's a matter of purging the Christian message of its Greek philosophical corruption and bringing it back to its Hebraic biblical worldview. And when we do that, then we can relate to a Jew. Say, listen, I am a Gentile who worships the God of Israel. This is very simple. Biblically, this is very simple, but to most Christians, that's a radically foreign concept.
But anyway, this last minute clip that we have here of Joel Richardson says it all. He knows there's been an apostasy. He knows the church has been corrupted. And he knows that they don't understand that Israel is to be gathered. The only thing is that he thinks that all is going to happen after the coming of Christ. What he doesn't know is what Glenn Beck could have told him. So I'm hoping that many of you will be able to send this clip to Glenn Beck and many others if you can. Just send them a link so that maybe they can get the idea even.
And the point in all of this is to highlight the Israel centricity of it all. Because this is what happens with Americans as we start studying biblical prophecy and, universally, everywhere I go, if there's a Q&A, where's America in Bible prophecy? And I go like, I hate to break it to you, but this book is not all about us. It doesn't revolve around the United States. It revolves around Israel, Jerusalem, Israel, and the Middle East. And we're kind of like vaguely referred to as those that dwell at ease in the coastlands. It's just kind of like, those that are whatever, watching Dancing with the Stars. And just dwelling at ease, we're sitting back in our lazy chairs. Oh, there's another Middle Eastern war, flicking popcorn in our mouth and, turn on Fox News or whatever, kind of the bravery of being out of range, but to get the biblical context. And so really what we're talking about is a thoroughly biblically contextualized perspective on the end times.